Hey, welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations with Chessie and Andre.
Hello.
Um, Multicultural Family Hub. We are excited to be here with you today. We have had a lot going on.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of moving from a town of about 150 in rural Northern California to Savannah, Georgia, and we have about a month left. And so we are been cleaning our house like maniacs to show it, which we keep joking. It feels like we are waking up at Airbnb because there's
Like
not just like
whose house is
kid
this?
stuff everywhere.
Yeah, whose house is this? This is a nice kitchen.
Yeah, it's honestly been so nice because you can kind of see all the work we can see all the work
Yeah.
we've done and just like living in it feels like this,
You're like, oh, someone could live here.
yeah, this middle game. Yeah, in a really beautiful way.
Yeah.
So we're in the middle of all of this transition. And happy to be here with you today. We had someone reach out to us and say, what is a multicultural family?
Yeah.
And we realized that we had never honestly addressed that or talked about like what our definition of a
Mm.
multicultural family is and why it matters so much to us. So that's what we're going to talk about today is what we define as a multicultural family.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
Yeah, so I think when we conceptually, this is for us. Someone else might have a different definition, or you might come up with your own definition. I think for us, what we had recognized was it's when any two individuals come together and they are blending different cultures. And so I give some examples, like you could have two people that have, let's say, white skin, but one is from rural Northern California and one is from Philadelphia. Well, they're going to have different cultures or different cultural norms or different cultural makeups when they come together as a couple. And those,
I
and
want to pause for a second because we keep using the word culture. So when we say cultural norms, we're talking about like values,
yeah,
thoughts about money, religion,
how you celebrate holidays,
right,
what holidays you do celebrate, what do you do on those holidays?
how your family operates. Are they always together or does always everyone kind of do their own
Yeah, yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Just so when we talk about culture, we are really I feel like so much of it is like embedded in the family structure.
Exactly.
Sorry, so
Yeah, and
continue.
so then any two people that come together to create their own family, but they're coming from different cultures. That is what we define as a multicultural family. So it doesn't have a specific physical look. It can, but it's more about the origin of both of those individuals and what helped shape them, what helped, define who they are or their values. And now that they are adults and they're linking up with another adult that comes from a different culture, maybe a different set of values or a different geography, they're coming together, and that's what creates that multiple cultural layer.
Would you say that in America right now, specifically just speaking about America, there are more families that are multicultural families than not?
Yeah, yeah, I would say a vast majority of families are multicultural. Now, do they define themselves as that or do they have that language? I'm not sure, but when you look at, take your general friend group and you say, okay, who out of my friend group that's a couple that's together come from the same place or come from the same state or the same town or the same family makeup, you've realized it's not most families.
It's pretty rare because back in the day, right? You are encouraged to like meet Susie from down the block. And I'm using Susie because I grew up in rural Northern California. It could be definitely a different name. You're like want to meet Susie down the block and your parents have known each other and that is an easy transition because you understand the expectations, you know the roles you're supposed to have. But in this moment in time where we're much more fluid and in and out, I do think that there are you meet people in different. What are you gonna say?
Well, I was thinking about if you think about distance, right? So even in our town that we live in, our small little town, at 1.3 miles down the road used to be an existing town.
Yeah,
And so you think about that doesn't seem
that's a
like
good
like
point.
why would you have a town and then and then 3 miles down the road another town and then 5 miles another town? Well, back if you think about when you're walking 3 or 5 miles, that's a decent distance. Or when you're on a horse or in a carriage. But now because distance,
Distance is
is
this.
distance is this.
Yeah.
Distance is I'm a flight and I'm across the country, or I'm in a
I'm a Zoom
different country,
meeting.
or I'm in a Zoom meeting. Your ability to access different people that you're likely to connect with and develop a relationship with is has expanded to such a degree, is only going to continue to expand, that you're going to have people that are interacting from different places and different cultures coming together in relationship. So
And I also want to like express that we recognize that so there is like so many relationships are multicultural, right? And sometimes those relationships are multicultural and have the same skin tone. And I want to recognize that when you have a multicultural relationship with different skin tones, it ups the ante,
there's a different
right?
layer to
There's
it.
another layer to that experience. And so just want to be clear on that. I don't think it's the same experience for everyone within a multicultural family. But I would say more families are multicultural than maybe we would think about. And I want to like back up a little bit from my own personal experience with culture. So Andre and I met in the Peace Corps in Lesotho. It's a teeny tiny little country inside of South Africa. And South Africa was such a fascinating place to explore culture, as an American personally, because I grew up learning America's history in terms of black and white and the tensions between black and white being about race. And when I was in South Africa, there are 11 national languages and multiple tribes. And Lesotho is predominantly comprised of one tribe, Sesotho. And so looking at the skin tones of South Africa being predominantly brown skinned, right? But all of these tribes and all of this conflict within the tribes and the tribes being different cultures and recognizing, oh my gosh, like it's not necessarily about the conflict isn't necessarily about race, but about our cultural differences. And how many times when I was in Lesotho, like things got lost in translation in the deepest possible way in real time. And yes, there were differences because my skin tone was different. I stood out like a sore thumb in Lesotho. And the experience that I had in Lesotho was very different than Andre. So, right, again, skin tone is one layer, but the thing that I ran up into again and again was culture and seeing that within this one nation of South Africa, all these different tribes and cultures were like trying to get along and recognizing just how deep the like the differences in culture ran. And that was the first time I started thinking about things in terms of culture, and then also getting to know Andre, who grew up in the South. I'd love, and his experience as like a rural woman from Northern California with no experience with people of color growing up. And then I got to meet Andre and was like, oh, wow, your experience of culture in the South as a man of color was so different than like the interpretation I would have taken. And talking about you growing up in a multicultural environment within the South. I would love to,
Yeah,
share that.
it was and is an interesting experience, because I was raised in Georgia, and but my mom is from Jamaica, and so I almost grew up in a culture within a culture. And so even though I was located in the southern state of Georgia, my primary influences and my mindset and my mind frame and a lot of my socialization came from what you'd call like a Caribbean diaspora, or people, whether they're from Jamaica or they're from another Caribbean island or they immigrated from a different place. And so culturally, there was my culture was a very different than even some of my friends who I grew up in my neighborhood whose families had been, born and raised in like say like Alabama or Florida or Georgia for several generations. And so that was really interesting for me because it's like I was a part of quote unquote like a Black Southern context, but the food, the celebrations, the language, all of that was different. And so I never quite fit into, like someone say, oh, I'm an African American Southerner, I'm a Black Southerner. I never quite fit or could fully be within that because I was that from my dad's side of the family, but then I was this other piece that was this Caribbean culture, from Jamaica. And so I kind of grew up always toggling in and out of these worlds. And sometimes it created a lot of fluidity and it allowed me to had a lot of freedom to do things where other people may have felt like they couldn't. But then a lot of time it created a lot of tension because you don't have the skills to navigate. How do you not choose one of those? How do you allow yourself to be all of them? And I didn't have the conversations, I didn't have the tools, I didn't have someone to guide me through that. Like a lot of kids that are comprised of multiple cultures don't. And oftentimes, even within that context of, let's say, Southern African American, Southern Black, and this Caribbean culture, there were things that were at conflict. There were things that they didn't really mesh well. I think of a story I really wanted. I was a super small, skinny kid, but like any kid, especially in the South, I was like, I want to play football, which if you'd have saw me, it's a ridiculous idea, And my mom, being raised in Jamaica, she didn't know anything about Little League football. She's just like, I've seen football on TV, but I don't know anything about this thing. And so I remember I had like begged her and begged her to please, put me in football. And if you're not familiar with football in the South of the United States, like it's a serious thing. I mean, even at like Little League or Rec League, there's nothing fun about it. You are winning. It is a physical. And I remember there were kids that were my age that were like, they had muscles, like physical muscles. And I was just like this super skinny, long, part Indian kid who's like, I want to play football. And so I remember, she signed me up, not kind of knowing what was it. And I remember the first like practice we're supposed to go to. First of all, the helmet is like just jiggling, nothing fits. And like she came and she was like, well, I'm gonna watch for a little bit, see what this whole thing's about. And I remember, I'll never forget, you get to the field and I'll never forget they had this, and look, we were young, let's say we were like 9 years old. Kids, brains have not fully developed, bodies have not fully developed. And I just will never forget these two coaches, they're like whistling and they're yelling, and they get all these kids in a circle, and then they're like, when I blow the whistle, I want you to run at him and you're gonna hit each other head to head as hard as you can. And I remember literally being there and being like, I will do anything for someone to get me out of this situation. Like all I wanted was for somebody to be like, because I did not, everything in my body was like, this is it for me. And the other kids that had grown up in it, they were like all about it. And I remember watching these two kids, he blew the whistle, and these two kids just hit each other. And for me, it sounded like a car crash. It sounded, in my mind, it looked like two professional athletes. That's how fast and strong they were. And sure enough, with no hesitation, my mom walks over.
Who's little?
She's little. She grabs my arm. She's like, we're going home. She didn't say anything to the coach. She didn't say, hey, can I talk to you? No, she didn't ask about concussions or she even question if this was a good or bad decision. She was like, we're out of here. And I remember talking to her recently, we had a conversation about this. And I said, why was that like so? And I was so thankful, and I'm really thankful now that I'm a fully developed, adult and, know the implications of small children smashing their heads together. I asked her, why was that so easy for you? And she said to me, she's like, well, because in Jamaica, there wasn't football in Jamaica. I mean, there's soccer, they call it football, but there's not American football in Jamaica. So for me, it wasn't a question I didn't have to question, should I not let you do that? For me, I looked at it and I was like, that looks inherently dangerous, not worth the risk to your brain. And I didn't have any cultural pressure where she talked about having conversations with her other friends who grew up and were raised within, the American Black Southern culture. And for them, not having your young brown son engage in football was a huge social risk because it was so much cultural pressure because that's how you became physical, that's how you became a man. Whereas for her, she was like, no, you can do track and field, you can be a doctor, you can play soccer, or you can do cricket, or you can do anything else. But like for her, this was just fun. No, so that's one story that kind of highlights some of the. Now, if someone saw me on the outside, they wouldn't pick up on any of that.
Right.
But that was the internal culture stuff.
Were you in that moment? I know you said in the moment that you're like seeing kids hitting each other.
Physically terrified.
You were terrified.
Yeah.
But before that, were you trying to pick a culture? Were you like, man, I really want to play football to fit in?
Yeah, the only reason why I ever would even consider playing football because once again that the Caribbean was that my family or my mom's microculture, but the overculture, as soon as you stepped out of my house, like the shoes or the baseball, the cards you had, what people talked about, it was about these brown athletes. And so if you wanted to be a part of that, you were going to have to do the thing, which was there was football and there was baseball and there was like basketball, and so that was your way of, especially being someone that was multicultural, that would have been my end of, okay, if I do this, then I'm a part of the culture.
Can you think of a time where instead of a blend, you were trying to pick one or the other and you felt like either an internal fracture or you like started going down one road in terms of like, well, this is what this culture says, and you were like going down that road and then eventually were like, oh no, that doesn't resonate, and like kind of became like moved back towards the blend that makes you up?
Well, I don't think I ever, when I was younger, ever, because I think it takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of support, and it takes a lot of mindset work to blend, like to really accept both. So I can't say I ever blended. I think I was a constant in between, and this could be within a day, right? So like you wake up in the morning and you're there, and then you go to school and you're here, and then you come home, and then you go to after school activity, and then for me, then you walk into the Decatur Farmers Market, which any of you that aren't familiar with that, Decatur, Georgia, there's this incredible farmers market. And when you walk into this place, everyone working, not everyone, most people working there from a different country, and they have a name tag stating their country. So when I walked into the Decatur Farmers Market,
my favorite place,
that was like home for me because I didn't have to be anything. Except for the moment, even today, when I walked into the Decatur Farmers Market, every person who is either from Ethiopia or Eritrea, they literally yell at me and try to tell me which part of Ethiopia I'm from. And when I say, oh no, my dad is, my dad, no, my dad's, from Florida, and my mom's from Jamaica, they will literally argue with me like, yeah, no. That's just where your parents were born. But you are, and at one, I remember recently we're at the checkout, and two people, they started arguing with each other about the specific part of Ethiopia, which region I was in front of me. And so, but even with that being said, it was always those spaces were the only spaces where I felt like I could just be whatever this is without explaining it. But the moment you stepped out, and I would also say same thing with South Africa, spending time in South and Southern Africa. That was because I didn't have to. I was automatically. People were like, you get a pass.
Yeah.
And it's okay that you're all mixed up because, it's all good. But in terms of being a kid, I didn't have access to things like Multicultural Family Hub, or my mom also didn't have access to things like Multicultural Family Hub. And she will tell you there were certain things at that time in that region out of Atlanta or outside of Atlanta, Georgia, that it was very scary for her because some of it was so not her culture.
Right.
And so she didn't know how to in her best doing, there's certain things about, Southern Black culture that she wanted me to embrace and she wanted to be part of, but there was certain things about that she was fearful of. And so then she's also trying to do this dance of which part of these cultures do I want you to hold on to? But once again, it's really hard to do that lift on your own. So that was so I don't have an answer of a time when I was a kid where I was able to like bring it together. I think I'm now in this journey, probably as a father and as someone that's asking all these questions, I'm finally comfortable like being all of it and holding that.
I
Yeah.
feel so lucky because of your experience. In some ways, like we are blending two cultures,
Mhm.
but and you have this internal experience of having done some of that, and so recognizing that for our kids as well. And I think in terms of one of the things multicultural families face is um, there's like kind of the obvious tension between two cultures when you each have like different ways of doing things.
Mhm.
That's like a classic one, right? Where it's like for when my family comes together, it's like everyone sits at the table and we are together and it is formal. Whereas where your family comes together, it's like, great, we're all here, like we're gonna pick and eat and you can sit down, you cannot, like
You don't really
it's
know when it
really
starts, when it stops.
flexible. Yeah, and so the like right, so those are just those two examples of like there could be conflict in terms of like how we do it or how certain things look or expectations for when I say Christmas, it means like this set of things that happen every year. And when you say Christmas, it's like, so we like have some chicken curry and that's it.
Well, there were no chimneys in Jamaica, man. I'm pretty sure there still aren't. And so it was obviously like a lot of the cultural things that you grew up with, like take Christmas, that were like, these are icons. I mean, for us, I mean, it was like, I mean, come on. It's like, no, this is a time to have a great time, have a great food, but like it wasn't a cultural seriousness to it,
Right.
in terms of like it being like this holiday with these iconic things.
And all these like expectations
Yeah,
for
yeah. Like that's
how
why
things
there's
look.
not many Netflix Christmas movies filmed in the Caribbean. I don't know if you've ever, I mean, that'd be great, it'd be hilarious. I'd love to see one.
No Harl, no Hallmark reindeer.
Yeah. Yeah, and so and I also want to add in, in this set of the conversation, we've kind of talked about family of origin and place, but even you can go into certain things like people's religious or faith backgrounds or non-religious or faith backgrounds. Okay, those have cultures within them.
Yeah.
So the reason why we consider like, so even with that, you still have a multicultural thing that you're trying to navigate. How do you celebrate it? Do you go to church? Do you not go to a church? Do you not go to do you go to synagogue?
So many
Do you not?
layers.
All these things, and each of those have a culture. And then even with that, you can go a little bit deeper. It depends on which part of the country you're, if you have a faith upbringing where you practice. Was it Philly? Was it Arizona? All of those probably have different cultural makeups. And so that's why for us, I kind of want to tie this in, because I know that we have gotten this question. People have asked, like, why don't you focus on race? And I want to say there are incredible people out there doing amazing work on the issues that not just our country, but our world is still navigating in terms of race relations and race conflicts and things like that. But the reason why we chose to focus on culture, which does all tap in to, racial norms, racial expectations, it's because it allows us to go even, I think, a little bit deeper and kind of touch on some of the things that are not so obvious.
Yeah.
It's not so obvious that there could be a conflict between a Caribbean culture in Atlanta and a Black Southern culture. You wouldn't, if I focused on race, it would be so easy for someone to say, well, you're obviously the same because you have brown skin. But when I go to culture, then it allows us to go, no, if there's conflict there, then the conflict is about something other than just our skin. So we recognize that race, and we recognize that there's a lot of work still to be done on that, and we support those that are out there doing that amazing work. And I also feel like there's people doing such great work on it that you can get access to that. But for us, reason why I focused on culture, multicultural, and a multicultural mindset is because it's what I wished when I was a kid I would have had access to. It's also when Chessie and I got together in a relationship,
Yeah.
it's what we didn't have access to that would have probably help us reduce and release and a lot of earlier tensions in our relationships that
Yeah.
we thought were based on personality or based on differences, but really
Right.
there were cultural conflicts that no one had ever explained to us.
Right.
Yeah. So I just want to put that in there of why we also culture, and it's also the framework and it's also the lens at which I think you and I view the world is
Yes.
through a cultural
Yeah.
lens. And
I feel like it is allows us to see a wholer version of someone, to say that you are not just black, white, brown, what the very narrow categories that
mhm,
race gives us. But it allows us to say like, oh, you grew up in like a Polish Dominican family in New York City.
mhm,
That is like a very nuanced thing to talk about, like the culture you inherited, and be able, when you're moving into a relationship, be able to say like, oh, like this is where I'm coming from, and these were all the things that my family did surrounding like religious or not, whether we were into sports or music, whether you valued education or whatever it is,
mhm,
right? All of those pieces are going to give you a much more nuanced lens
mhm,
versus saying this or that.
mhm,
And I think it also allows us to see one another as more fully human and exactly what we are, because when you're raising multicultural children, especially with different skin tones like ours are, they struggle to see themselves reflected.
mhm, mhm,
They struggle to see themselves reflected, especially in the larger culture of race, where it's like, well, I'm not black or white, and
mhm,
my mom looks like this, and my dad looks like this. And when we can talk to our kids, we can say, wow, like, this is where I'm from. This is mom's culture. And this is dad's culture. And this is the culture of your grandfather and your grandmother. And this is how we're blending in, and this is what I experienced growing up, and this is why we're going to bring this to the table. And you know what, I did this thing as a kid and it was not good for me, so
mhm,
we're going to leave that
yeah.
cultural story behind. And so it allows our children to, I feel like, develop their own identity that is solid versus feeling like, wow, I never quite fit.
Mhm. Or or I have to choose a part
Yeah.
of myself and cut the other part off and leave
Yeah.
that on the table,
And say I'm this or that.
which in my opinion it's a form of trauma if you have to do that to yourself. But then the other thing we've kind of talked right now mostly about the conflicts or the not conflicts but the challenges of navigating being a multicultural family. However, one of our other reasons for uh that we recognize within as being a multicultural family within other multicultural families is that I fundamentally believe the experience of having a multicultural experience, either being in a multicultural relationship or being a child within a multicultural family, is you do develop it gives you the opportunity to develop a different brain and a different mindset and a different way of thinking that I believe can be an absolute superpower.
I completely agree.
It allows you, and the best way I can describe it as my lived experience is you're able to pull yourself out of things and really take a big 360-degree view. So it becomes very hard for people to tell you you can't do that or that this is how it is. Because even growing up, for me, I remember in my neighborhood, someone would say, well, this is how it is. Well, that person didn't realize, oh, well, 2 weeks ago on summer break, I was in Savannah Lamar in Jamaica, and I can tell you that this is what I saw there. Or I was at the beach in the grill, and when you tell me, black people don't swim, I literally was, swimming with master fishermen and guys that are diving down, catching lots. So
Mm.
all of so but I didn't have the language at the time, but like as you're like, you are able to go, nothing that someone is saying to you about a certain thing is absolutely true because you have this multicultural framework and because you have this multicultural experience, your kind of hands and toes are always in different things. So you kind of know, even if I don't have the cognitive ability to explain myself, I can feel in my body that none of the limitations that you're saying is rooted in solid truth. It's only rooted in your limited experience or the experience your culture has passed down to you. And so I do believe it's an absolute superpower. And I think one of the things that we want to do is help multicultural families and parents understand that you can use a multicultural mindset framework to tap in to the superpower and the vital energy that's there and help your kids tap into their multicultural superpower as they navigate, whether it be school or jobs or being an entrepreneur or traveling. They have this tool that unfortunately we don't often unlock because we haven't really been taught how to do that.
I think until this moment in time, we had millions of years of history where we were so separate. We were within our own tribes, and our bodies are like set up for that, right? And our bodies are set up for that in terms of like that other thing is dangerous. And we only know the stories that our culture has told. And to have a multicultural mindset is to hear other stories and be like, oh, that could be true as well. And so being able to becoming really good at identifying like, oh, that's the story of the like black man in the South saying, black people don't swim. Whereas the story in Jamaica is that no, we are incredible fisher people and divers, and we have this rich and like history in the ocean. And being able to see both of those stories and then say, oh, what's true for me? Because I might not like swimming, or man, I am so drawn to the ocean and I love it. And
or my body hates the way chlorine in a pool feels, but you put me in salt water and there's things that things in my body that light up, that are old, that are ancient, that it goes, okay, this is home. And so that is what multicultural family means to us. It means a lot. I guess you would say it's people that have had a lived experience and are blending those lived experiences together to create something that is recognizes and honors all the aspects of their cultures and not saying we're going to cut this part out in order to fit into a box of what a family looks like.
Yeah, and it is more challenging because you do have to ask a whole lot more questions.
Yes.
Right? So you have to ask a whole lot more questions. You have to dig deeper. It is work, but I think it is vital, beautiful work for our future.
Yeah.
And like I said, the value of a multicultural mindset, it is preparing our families and children for the future that is inevitably coming. We are not going to continue to stay siloed. The world is connected, and the more that you practice the skill of recognizing, oh, that's culture, and I'm going to listen to that and see what I can glean or what I can take away, or oh, that person is reacting that way because of their culture. And I think it creates incredible skills for ourselves within our interpersonal relationships, within business relationships, for our being able to model it for our children and teaching them how to move within a multicultural setting, because that is the future. It is not,
it's the now and the future.
It's now and the future. And so for us, we are so passionate about giving our kids a really beautiful multicultural mindset so that they can roll into the world and see the stories and then choose what they're going to take with them.
And we want to do this in community because we do feel that when a group of people get together to do self-work like this, it has a massive impact on not just a family scale, but on a community scale and then on a global scale. And so that's what we are so excited about when we think about what a multicultural family is and why we want to be in community together and what things we want to learn together and grow together to continue to develop a multicultural mindset and pass that down to the next generation. Because, like Jesse said, whether you're an organization or whether it's business or whether it's just general life, this, I believe, is it's not an AI-able skill. It's gonna, but it's a absolute necessary skill, I believe, in terms of if you want to keep, yourself, and also if you want the generations before you to keep going and thriving and having a beautiful, peaceful life rather than a life of conflict and trauma and things like that. Yeah.
And if this, we are so excited to, we are not so far away from opening the doors of Multicultural Family Hub where we'll be able to connect with you guys. And I just want to ask you if this resonated or you were like, wow, I had never thought about myself being in a multicultural family. Or if someone came to mind that you were like, whoa, they're in a multicultural family. I never thought about that before. Please share it with
Mhm.
them or share it with someone that comes up that you're like, wow, this really hit me and I think you'd be interested. We really want to start spreading our message that like this is a really beautiful, important skill and to help recognize multicultural families and help them see themselves in terms of like maybe they were feeling frustrated or stuck and just like why does this stuff keep coming up? I feel like we can't move forward. My kids are feeling
Mhm.
uncomfortable. Right? If any of that resonated, share it with them because we really want to start reaching out and supporting people and saying like we see you, we have so much to learn together, and identifying our stories and building your own beautiful unique family culture so that we can go out into the world and do beautiful
Yeah.
things.
Oh.
So
And
yeah.
if you happen to be traveling and you're in the greater Atlanta or the Decatur, Georgia area, check out the DeKalb Farmers Market if you want to have an embodied multicultural experience with people, with food,
So
with
good.
sounds. Yeah, it's kind of one of the places that I think is my origin point, and that
It's
kind of
so
guides me.
cool.
So good.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us
Yeah.
today. We so appreciate your time and your attention, and don't take it for granted that you were here.
Mhm.
So we will chat again soon.
See you guys. Bye.